In the NFL, there is a standard you must uphold if you want to last. Some fall well below expectations, while others more than excel. Whatever side of the spectrum you look at though, there are a plethora of unbreakable records in the NFL. Some of these records in NFL history are so absurd that you cannot possibly imagine anyone breaking them, whether they're career-long accomplishments, or just for a season, or even something that happened in the span of a half. These records are, in my opinion, records that will never be broken. These are in no particular order, so this is not a countdown or anything like that, although I will say the last two, I believe, are my personal picks of the ones that will definitively, like, there's a tier for this. These are on a different tier of unbreakable records, if that makes sense.
Nope.
For the first unbreakable record, we have to go with the largest comeback in NFL history. This is the most recent one that was broken on our list, so I figured it's a good place for us to start as it's a little bit fresh in most of our minds. The year was 2022 and Kirk Thuggins was running wild with the Vikings. In this 2022 season, they had a total of 8 comeback wins, none bigger than the one they had against the Colts. The Colts were up huge on Minnesota, going into the half with a 33-0 lead. Everything changed though in the second half. After punting on their first drive, Minnesota would score on a touchdown on their next 5 straight, while the defense would hold the Colts to a single field goal all throughout quarters 3 and 4. Their comeback would be complete in overtime as the Vikings would score on the go-ahead field goal after the defense would hold the Colts to a 3-and-out, marking the largest comeback in NFL history. This one may never be broken as the one before it was thought to be untouchable when the Bills overcame a 32-point deficit against the Houston Oilers back in the 1992 wildcard game. We now go from an unbreakable game record to a career-long record that may never be broken. Emphasis on career long, as we have the record for the most seasons ever played in the NFL. That honor goes to George Blanda, having played in 26 seasons. Blanda's career began all the way back in 1949 and played in every season up until 1975. And while there were many seasons that my boy was, well, be straight up ass, you don't make it 26 seasons without being at least somewhat good at what you're doing, right? In those 26 seasons, he managed 4 Pro Bowls and even earned MVP. And I don't think I'm doing it justice with how long 26 seasons actually is. To put it in perspective, Blanda's career was long enough to have played with slinging Sammy Ball, as well as the likes of Walter Payton. Do you guys realize how big of a stretch that actually is? The closest person to breaking this record was Morton Anderson, the longtime Chiefs kicker, but he only made it to 25 seasons. Currently, Aaron Rodgers is the closest player to break this record. He is currently in his 20th season, but to just tie the record, Aaron would have to play until he's at least 46 years old. And for an added note, if you're wondering where Brady ranks in this list, he's actually 4th all time. The more you know. Now, as NFL fans, we all like to see points scored. A lot of points equals an exciting game, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
By this logic, the highest scoring game of all time should have been a fun contest to watch, right?
Yeah.
The holders of the record of most points scored in a game go to the Commanders, then Washington Redskins, against the Giants all the way back in 1966. Even though the Giants never gave up, Washington just kept pouring it on. Ultimately, the Skins would score a total of 72 points. Only this kind of number could put the 41 that the Giants put up themselves to shame. In total, the team scored 113 points together. While this was somehow still a blowout, the second place game was a bit more fun as the Browns and Bengals had an unforgettable game in 2004. When the final whistle was blown, Cincy defeated Cleveland 58-48, a 106-point total. So while it was more fun, it was still 8 points short of the record. I do believe out of all the unbreakable records I mentioned in this video, this one may be the one that's most likely to be broken considering how the game favors the offense these days. But still, when you think about it, 114 points in a game, despite the era that we're in, is absolutely insane. Wouldn't you agree? While there are many unbreakable records on offense, that does not mean there aren't some on defense that I believe can't be broken. This brings us to the record for most sacks in a game, held by Chiefs legend Derek Thomas. In a game against the Seahawks in 1990, Thomas got into the backfield to sack Dave Krieg a total of 7 times. A feat that has always been close to being broken, but 30 plus years later, it's still holding strong. Somehow the Chiefs still lost this game, by the way, 17-16. Many players have gotten as close as 6 sacks, with Khalil Mack's 6-sack performance coming the most recent in 2023. But with all the great pass rushers that have come and gone since Thomas's 7-sack game, combined with the fact that offenses play a more quick pass style, this is one that may stand the test of time. All the entries that I've mentioned in this video thus far are records that anyone would want to break. This next one is probably one that you wouldn't ever want to break. And so far, everyone has done well not to break it, as this was done in the 1950 NFL season and has only ever been threatened once. The record is the most interceptions thrown in a game. This honor goes to Jim Hardy, who was the quarterback of the then Chicago Cardinals. In a 1950 game against the Eagles, Hardy would throw an unprecedented 8 interceptions. Needless to say that the Cardinals were eviscerated this day with a final score of 45-7. It makes you question why this guy stayed on the field as long as he did. But then again, head coach Curly Lambeau had earned a reputation to this point where you don't question what that man was doing. And like I mentioned before, only one quarterback in the last 74 years has even come close to matching him. That being Ty Detmer of the Detroit Lions, who threw 7 of his own in a game against the Browns in 2001. Now, as bad as those 2 performances were, I do think there was one guy that could have broken it relatively recently had he not been pulled. And I think a lot of you guys know where I'm going with that. I believe if Nathan Peterman hadn't been pulled out of the game when he was playing with the Bills, he would have probably either matched or maybe even broken the record at the pace that he was going. Peterman had tossed 4 interceptions in the first half of the game, and then still threw another one in the second half before finally getting the plug pulled. The only way I could see this ever being broken is if a superstar quarterback was having the most miserable game of his career, of his life, of anything that we ever seen. Because to break this record, your coach has to willingly not pull you out of the game. And how do you not pull somebody out after they're like 6th interception? You know what I mean? And I think only a superstar could have that kind of privilege. So I think this is one that may never be broken in the NFL. We're now moving on to our final 2 records. And as I said in the intro, these are the 2 records that I believe will never be broken. Again, there's tears to this unbreakable, you know, just trust me on that. Trust me, bro. The first record I'm gonna mention here belongs to Jerry Rice, who he himself owns plenty of receiving records that could make an argument to make this list. But the one we will zero in on is his career receiving yards, as Rice takes the top spot, and it's not even close. Jerry Rice was able to accumulate 22,895 yards in the 2 decades that he played in the league. That is an average of 1,144 yards per season. Second place goes to Larry Fitzgerald, who had a pretty long career of his own, but he's still over 5,000 yards behind Rice at just 17,492. Currently, the closest active player is Julio Jones with 13,703 of his own, but his career is hanging on by a thread. To be honest, I don't even know if he's on a team currently. Someone would have to average nearly 1,200 yards a season for 20 years. Do you realize how insanely difficult that is? Most wide receivers, as legendary as they are, don't play 20 seasons to begin with. No one, at the very least in my lifetime, I'm not even 30 yet, will touch this record. Finally, the other record I believe is the most locked in for unbreakable will go to Emmitt Smith's career rushing record. In a similar vein to Rice, no one produced at a high level for as long as Smith did during his run in the league. He was a running back who lasted an incredible 15 seasons. This is coming from a position that is done with most once they turn 30. In those 15 seasons, Smith carved out a total of 18,355 yards, a feat that he has hung on to since passing sweetness himself, Walter Payton, who comes in second at 16,726. A big reason why I think this record will stand the test of time is that the league has become more pass-friendly every year. As a result, the run game becomes less and less of a priority. Take Derrick Henry, for example. Henry has been the best runner of the football for years now, and while he has the highest rushing yards among active running backs currently, he's only at the 10,000 yard rush mark. Henry is already 30 years old, meaning he would have to average about 1,000 yards a season for the next 8 years. And while the 30-year-old still does look good, and he's definitely in a system that benefits him greatly, I sincerely doubt this will last into his mid to late 30s. That is the video, ladies and gentlemen. What do you guys think? What record did I miss on, and what record am I wrong about? Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, boy.